Alrighty. Got my coffee. How's everybody doing? Oh. Make chat a little bigger so I can see it. There we go. All right. Let's see. Let's start the game and just show where we're at the moment. I think I'm running this in development right now, so let's run development. Hey Gerard, how's it going? Hello Beach. I changed the font out on the loading screen because I'm gonna make some adjustments. But here, I think I have a controller, and the game now works on controller with 32 degrees of movement. So for anybody who's in chat who's unaware, this is a 2D isomorphic game. So this is all 2D sprites. There's no 3D in the game. But it looks very 3D, which I'm very happy with. I think 32 degrees is probably as high as I'll go. It seems to work out pretty well. Kind of covers the illusion. We've got sensors that can go when you stand on them. We've got sensors that can go when you raycast into them, so you don't have to stand on them. And then we've got sensors that you have to stand in, that you have to also click the button. None of that fires events right now, but all the colliders work and stuff like that. We still have an issue with the Z indexing. There are two solutions to this. So I don't know that we're going to have doors in the game, doors of this style anyway. Why not 360 degrees for a full circle? You mean like 300? So every angle is a sprite, or every angle is actually a series of sprites, right? So we've got the running animation here. Let me run the debug. Actually, that makes I have a little debug application here. Don't know why my terminal is slow at the moment. So I've got this little debug application. It'll take a second to build because I haven't built it in the last day or two. So this is looking for a JSON file here and a, let's get the size of this back up too. So this is an example application in the root of the project called debug animation. It takes this animation file that I'm creating from effectively Blender metadata that I'm rendering out with a Python script, which we can take a look at. But I can't make this code any bigger, so it's a little bit annoying to look at. But basically, I'm doing like NLA track selection in here. So like, oh, there goes our little debugger. So I'm doing the NLA track selection in here. If you can see the NLA tracks, some of them have names. Like this one is running, that one's idle. And if you solo them, then they run in the scene. So that all renders out into a sprite sheet with 32 directions, and that's what I mean by 32. So it's tau over 32 increments. You can only face in one of these 32 directions from a sprite sheet perspective. From a control perspective, you can go 360 degrees, but you will always snap to one of these sprites. If you ever bring controller support into your game, you'll hardbind movement to D-pad. I guess, you know, that's, you know, you can totally do that. Steve means tau radians. Yeah, I did start using tau after you made that comment last week, I think, or the week before. But this little debug thing is powered by Bevy Inspector eGUI. So this is like the spellcast raise animation. And if I want to look at the running animation, I can do that. Or the idle animation. If this text box works the way I think it does. idle animation is not really readable at small sizes as an idle. So that's a bit of an issue that I'll fix at some point. There's also the dash animation. And this could be a select box. I just didn't put the effort into making it a select box. So all of that renders out into a sprite sheet. The sprite sheet is like 5,000 sprites large. The slow terminal is not a Bevy issue. The slow terminal is a new shell issue. I have added too many additional third-party like scripts on boot up. So that is not a Bevy thing. That is a new shell thing. And I just haven't looked into it because it's not annoying enough for me to look into. But I believe if I disable a bunch of my like extra aliases and stuff, all the things that it's kind of like, let's see. I have like a ton of Git aliases set up. I think I have that in here somewhere. Which thing? Is it new? It's a new scripts. What are my options here? I don't look at this fairly often. Not custom completions, but maybe aliases would be the right one to look at. So there's some reason causes an issue. So my terminal slowdown is new shell related, and I know that it is because it happens when I'm not working with Bevy. VS Code crashing with out of memory is a different issue as well. That might be a Rust Analyzer issue if you have a really low memory size, like if you, I don't know, if you have like 2 gigs or something. But anyway, my slow runtime or my slow terminal only happens occasionally and is new shell like alias boot up, like startup cost related. It is not related to Bevy. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this. I added a new like command so that you can do the little raise. So if you hold circle on the controller, it'll just keep doing this. That's not quite the animation I want for that, but this also isn't the character we're going to end up using in the end game. This is all blockout stuff just to make sure that like the everything's working. One thing that I do want to fix at some point is that the character is too light. Like the colors are too light. And I'm not exactly sure why right now. Could be anything. Could be an effect of the Blender output. Could be, I don't know, whatever. When can we buy this game? It's going to be a while. Let's say, I'll tell you my goal is to work on it for like another like 2.5 months and then put the Steam page up if I'm going to continue working on it. So my goal is to get to Steam page. It's not to get to shipped release right now. And then once I get to the place where I feel like I can put a Steam page up, then I will make the decision about whether it's going to be a real thing or not. Game loop, I don't know yet. I think that it's going to be something fairly light on story at the moment, because my plan is to kind of finish this within the next 3 to 6 months, right? So there's only so many things that I can get into. But like my goal with this is to make and finish something. So it's probably going to be either a bullet helly kind of thing where you like are in the middle and you're fighting a bunch of things that attack you, and then there's an occasional boss, or something maybe small and room based. I think that the tiles are interesting. But yeah, I don't really have a full game loop in mind yet. Right now I'm thinking like there's going to be some kind of boss fight. I don't know exactly how those mechanics are going to work. I was actually thinking today that we might implement like an enemy, like kind of a punching bag enemy somewhere. like maybe put it on this tile or something. And then just like implement some really basic attacks. I've been making a Vampire Survivor clone for 11 months now. I'm hitting 12 months and releasing it on itch full stop. Making a legit Steam game is too much effort, to be honest, in Bevy. Yeah, so when I say I'm going to put something on Steam, what I mean is I'm going to go through the entire flow from like initial development through to putting the Steam page up, through to actually releasing the game. That doesn't mean I'm expecting to like make the next Hollow Knight or something. It is just like my goal is to get to games like 4 and 5, right? I don't want to be working on game 1 for 5 years. So my goal is to do a couple of things in this game, learn a couple of things about shipping the game actually in the full cycle, and then move on to the next one, make the next one a little bit better, make the next one a little bit better, that kind of thing. So I think there's 2 things I could do right now. One, we already have this like little circle animation running, which to me feels more like a circle cast or like a heal kind of spell kind of thing. So the way I imagine that working is either like it does in Hades, where you drop like a circle on the ground and you're like healing inside of it, or maybe a Hollow Knight-ish kind of thing where as long as you're holding this, it's trying to heal you. I think either of those things would be interesting. I think that we need an enemy in here at some point, and we need an attack, and we don't have the attack animation. We don't really need like a strong attack animation. It could just fire stuff. But maybe we do that first. Maybe we add the new animation, because we have 5 animations in the current sprite sheet. Hey Prince, how's it going? So what do we got here? We've got, let me minimize the Chrome window here. So we've got a couple of states. I'm using seldom state for like a literal state machine. The state machine is basically based on components. So if we have the idling component on the player entity, then we can remove that and insert the dashing component if dash is pressed. Like that's how to read these kinds of like transitions here. So from running, you can get into dashing by pressing dash. From running, you can get into idling by not giving any directional input, and so on and so forth. So down here, we've got the most recent one. That's the healing one that I just showed. So from idling, you can go into like the recover animation or whatever that cast is going to be. If you hold the heal button, and as long as you hold the heal button, you'll stay in healing, and once you release it, you'll get out and you'll be dropped into like idling or something. So I think that this is vaguely what we're going to do, but I think it's going to be a little bit more like dashing for the attack. And I want to keep in mind that our animations are going to be slow for what I'm thinking for attacks. But we're going to go with probably like magic casts for today and not swords. I was thinking about messing with a low poly racing sim in my free time, but it looks like more work than I anticipated. Also, Bevy doesn't support rumble force feedback. Is that what you're saying? I don't know how you would implement that. All right, see, dashing is going to be very similar, so we'll do this kind of thing. We'll just take that logic. Oh, steering wheel force feedback. So you're saying Bevy supports rumble, but not steering wheel force feedback. Is that correct? Okay, yeah, I could see that. I haven't used any steering wheel stuff at all, so I don't even know how you would code support for that. I mean, I imagine it at the basic level, it's also a signal, but I've never worked with one before. Last stream you wanted to propose something like drawing runes on screen or Magicka-like combat instead of typical slash shoot stuff, but since you want controller support, it's not going to feel well. Why wouldn't it feel good if it was... I don't know what Magicka stuff is. Is Magicka a game? I mean, you already sold me on the chain lightning, honestly. Chain lightning is probably my favorite my favorite like add-on element. Drop fire from the game, drop ice from the game. As long as you have chain lightning. Rocket Actix Axum, which one should I use if I'm trying to make a website with Rust? If you're just trying to make a website, what kind of website is the question. I think that all three of those are fine. I personally would go with Axum, but I think Axum versus Actix is kind of a personal choice at the moment. I think Rocket goes back and forth between having updates and not having updates, depending on like how the maintainer is feeling. So if you're comfortable with that, then Rocket is also a good choice. But for me, it's Axum. Axum has an amazing amount of examples in their repo. I don't know how many this is, but it's a lot. You do have to piece things together. There's no Rails or whatever. So Axum is what I would go with. But it's really up to you. It doesn't matter. It depends on what kind of site you're actually building. If you want to do a lot of client-side interactivity stuff, Leptos is really what I would go with. That's not their website. This is their website. Leptos is great for client-side interactivity stuff. And then you can put that on top of Axum and stuff like that. This doesn't show me any of the controls. I think that's one of the things that I'm really interested in from a like game marketing perspective is like, I almost don't know how this game plays from looking at the Steam page. And that seems like the #1 thing that you need to like have on your Steam page. Classic shield ball. It looks like, is it point and click? Is it, I can't actually tell. Yeah, I don't know. For all I know, this could be turn-based, honestly. I don't think it is, but yeah, I can't. Real time, combine elements by pressing respective buttons and fire at mouse cursor. Okay. Yeah, I think that looking at this Steam page, that's the thing that I want to solve for. Like putting up something that well represents the game. And if I can well represent the game and make it look visually attractive and whatnot, then making a good game is kind of just like, you have to make a good game regardless. And if I don't make a good game, then it's not going to be good. It doesn't look 2D ISO. I don't think it is 2D ISO. I think it's just like top down. Good players play it like piano, pressing tons of buttons per second. Very unique and skill-based system. That's very cool. I'm not looking for alternative control schemes at the moment. I'm kind of looking for something that is pretty straightforward that people will pick up pretty quickly. But that's a very cool idea. The idea that you could combine elements by pushing elements and then like firing at the mouse cursor. Let's see. Dashing is what we were going to go with here, right? I think technically there's gonna be some timeout for the attack, right? Like you're gonna get into the attack phase, and then you're not going to get out of the attack phase until either the attack has completed enough of the attack or like that kind of thing, right? Maybe you can dash out of it and cancel the attack. I kind of like that idea, where it's like, oh, I'm going to attack, especially with input buffering. Actually, now that I think about it, one of the things that like is interesting about Hades is that you can press, they have input buffering as far as I can tell. So if you press attack before you can actually attack, you can actually get locked into an attack after you meant to, like time-wise. And thus you are then locked into an attack at a delay, which doesn't feel good. So I think shortening that time or being able to dash out of an attack is probably pretty important. Are they dashing structs? Yes, they are. I have all those structs defined in here. Right now, they are pretty simple. They were hard coding the time frame for the animations. But as I'm getting into the new ones, now that I've rewritten the animation system a little bit, I can get rid of a little bit more of that. The current frame still needs to be held somewhere, but I think I can actually pull that out into a separate struct rather than repeatedly defining it on every struct. But our animation, that's not what I wanted to look at. Our animation, so each of these systems basically operates, or at least the way that I have it set up is when you have one of these components on the player, then these queries succeed. So like dashing here, right? And then we go into the metadata that I have to find out which animation we should be using and how long it is. And then we apply that animation based on which direction you're facing and which index in the animation we should be at. So if it's like, you know, a 30 frame animation at 30 frames per second, you get a tick 30 times every second. If for some reason you were lower FPS than that, if you were like 15, then it would be like a tick 15 times every, and you would start like skipping a couple frames. I actually don't know what the behavior will be with these timers in that case, because all I'm doing is +1, and if we complete the timer twice, I actually don't know how to detect that. I'm also using finished and not just finished. Let's see, timer dot duration elapsed fraction remaining. I think I actually want just finished here now that I think about it. I don't think I want finished. So let's change that quickly and make sure it works. How does that structure interact with the ray tracer? I'm not ray tracing anything. You mean like the point or the line coming out of the player? Oh, you know what? I think I just cleared up a little bit of hitching in the animation by doing just finished instead. You're talking about the ray that's coming out of the player, Steve? It doesn't interact with the ray tracing at all at the moment. Which I guess... I see what you're saying, though. Right? Let me add this. Oh, not that, though. Dang. Let me do this quickly. Okay, so we need to transition from, what, idling. Actually, that's to dashing. We don't want to dashing. We want from idling. So we've got idling, idling dash here, right? So I need to replace this keyboard. Jeez. Trans idling. So this would go into, what are we calling it? I guess we call it attack, right? Let's call it a quick attack, maybe? Primary attack? I don't know what to call this. Let's just call it attack. Let's go simple. So we're going to have to create this trigger. So that makes sense. And then for idling, we're also going to want to attack out of running, which is going to be basically the same thing. And my guess is that at some point we're going to want the movement to continue, but we'll see. Bevy, it doesn't come from Bevy. So the state machine struct here that I'm using comes from a crate called Seldom State. And it is not terribly complicated. It is, I will say, it's a little bit weird to get your head around if you're just reading the README. Because like, what does .trans mean? What does this initial state mean? What is the, like, reading this is not particularly intuitive. But what it's basically doing is inserting and removing components based on something that has happened while you're in some state. So you could write all this yourself. I just kind of like the structure it gives me. It is not in any way like critical. This could all be done without it. But I do kind of like it. And as long as it keeps working, I'm going to keep using it, I think. So from idling and from running, the only thing that I don't like about it, actually, now that we're talking about it, the only thing that I don't like about it is if we're going to have, let's say, idling, long idling, walking, running, dashing, sprinting, attacking, special attacking, maybe holds for both of those attacks. Now we're talking about 10 different states to be in. And there's no way for me to visualize all of those 10 states and how they can transition from one to the other right now. I don't think the crate has a visualizer. That's not to say you couldn't build one. There just definitely doesn't currently exist one, as far as I'm aware anyway. So if I wanted to be able to visualize this, I'd have to actually do, I don't know, some like asset serialization or something instead, which is also fine. We can kind of cross that bridge when we get to it, you know? Okay, so from idling, you can get into attack. From running, you can get into attack. You also need to get out of attack. And I think that that's going to happen like this, just like the dashing. In this case, you can come out of dashing into either running or idling, depending on whether you have input pressed. So let's do attack. Let's call this attack-ing, because I'm putting ing on everything here. So attacking. And this is going to be probably attack timer complete, right? Because an attack is only going to have one run through here. So that's really all we need to do for the state machine. We do need to add the attacking state, which is probably going to be very similar to the dashing state, minus the total frames. So maybe I grab all of this. We put it down here. And this is going to be attacking. Wow. Attacking We don't need the total frames because I've changed that in the way that the code works. The default, I think I'm going to steal the default from here, actually. Well, now that I think about it, I think that this needs to be... So this is one of the hangups on my current implementation, is that I need to hard code these frame counts. So let's take a look at the file. I won't need to hard code the frame counts in the long run. I'm just not fully refactored. Can it also be used for AI? There was a comparison with Big Brain. Yes, it can. There's a caveat in the README about comparing it to Big Brain, and it's basically the thing I just said, where if you end up having like a lot of states and like it being kind of fuzzy how to transition between them all, you can end up in a situation where you need to like define the transition between all of the states, and that's not necessarily something you want to do for something that has like a ton of states. So they kind of push you towards Big Brain if you want something a little bit fuzzier, and if you want something a little bit more like a player controller with a fewer frames, or fewer states and transitions between them, they push you towards using seldom state. Steve says a lot of abstraction. I mean, like, it's all right. Like it's legitimately like adding and removing components, right? So this to me is not terribly onerous, right? Because if we think about what we would need to do if we were just writing a regular system, you would have to query for a player entity in the idling state and then do detection of some kind if you were in a dash, or like if the player wanted to dash in that system, and then you would have to like remove idling and insert dashing or whatever. And like you could totally do that. It's not terrible, but then you would need that for everything. And this lets me separate the triggers to enter states as well as the actual activity of being in the state, which also lets me drive animation a lot easier. So this is not for dashing, this is for attacking. And then the dash frames we didn't look up, so let's look at assets. I've got a JSON file in here. And spellcast raise is the one we're using for like the healing. So spellcast shoot, I guess, is what we're going to use for this. It has 28 frames, so it's double the length of the dash. I don't know that that's what I want. I do know that total dash duration repeating. So we can kind of use this to control how fast this plays. So if we want the attack to last 1/5 of a second, we can do that. I guess let's start with that. 200 milliseconds still feels slow in terms of like human perception. So we probably actually want to speed that up, which means that this whole like shooting animation or whatever probably needs to be cut down to fewer frames, which makes sense. But now we've got attacking. We don't have our system yet, and we don't have our trigger yet. So I think I never ended up using this heal timer complete. So let's just change this to attack timer complete. And this will be attacking. And I think that these can be actually generic as well, because all of this code is just making sure that we have the player, we have the like metadata file, and we can find the animation that we want. So that could all go into something else. And then really all this trigger is are we past the frame at which the animation has finished playing? Oh yeah, attack frames. Good call. Oh, you mean yeah. What I actually started doing is I started removing the name actually. So I started doing this because this gets me closer to taking this out and actually making a separate struct that's responsible for the timer and the duration, or the timer and the frame count, which I think is actually where I'm headed in the long run. Because you can see, like, so for healing, we've got duration frames, timer frame, right? For attacking, we've got duration frames, timer frame. For everything else, we also have like duration frames, timer frame. So because this stuff was already written, I'm not refactoring it right now, but that's where I'm headed. I'm headed towards, there's going to be some kind of animation struct or something like that, or I don't know, some counter or whatever. And this is going to become something else that is then just always on, I think. And eventually having these numbers be, so the numbers are defined in a file, but we are headed that direction. So the file we just looked at, this file, which, let me open that in assets, animation. So this file, if we're looking at it in new shell, right? It's going to be a little bit awkward. But spellcast raise, idle, running, spellcast shoot. Let's do like get idle, then we have num frames and animations. If we go for the animations are each direction. Did I miss animations? And then the animations gives us actually the starting index in the texture atlas for all of the individual directions. So if you're facing 0 degrees, which is actually in the isometric projection southeast visually, then you start at index 384 and you run for 32 frames. So all of this information is actually already in a file, and I don't need to, for the vast majority of things, I don't need to actually memorize or do any math for that, which I really love. And that all gets written out by that Python script and then combined in a utility file that I wrote. What area is that? I have this crate called IV tools. It has a CLI actually. Let's run the help for the CLI. Let's see, Atlas would give me. So this would generate metadata, but let's just run help. I guess I didn't run it today or yesterday or recently. I just updated some Rust things. So a couple of my things need to recompile. But the long story short is that this is a CLI that I'm just kind of throwing stuff into to build tools to help. And one of these commands is actually generate metadata. So if we're looking at Atlas, this code is really messy. Don't judge me. I didn't plan on showing this to anybody. So I do this, execute is my own thing, so just imagine that it's some regular code running. So this is a subcommand called generate metadata. I'm looking in a specific directory because that's kind of just hard-coded right now. I walked there to look for any JSON files in that directory. Those JSON files look like, let's see if I can, Blender testing renders. That looks like this, which, can I just open these? No. That's fine. Let's look at one of them then. So if you open action dash, this is rendered out by the Python script. It gives you a JSON file with a name, a frame count, and a total frames. So this is the dash animation. It's got 12 frames. The total amount of frames for all of the dash animations is 384 because it's 12 times 32 right now. And then I combine all of that into a single metadata file that we were just looking at before. What's the deal with the Rust compiler being slow? Is it going to get faster? It always gets faster, actually. There's people constantly working on making it faster. The thing that I'll say about the Rust compiler is that it may be slower than doing like an interpreted language or whatever, but that's because it's doing work that the interpreted language is not, right? So Rust compiles are slow or perceived as slow, right? Because it's actually doing useful work at compile time. So you're basically doing a trade-off of, do I want it to run slower or do I want it to compile slower? Like one of those things is going to be true, generally speaking. And Rust chooses, I would rather compile slower and let my users or my application run faster, whereas interpreted languages kind of make the opposite trade-off. Like JavaScript will go into a browser and it'll be compiled once and then optimized, compiled again, and then you have to do all of that kind of stuff. So JavaScript may not be fast the first time it runs. It has to be multiple levels of compilation and whatnot. So yeah. Low-level coding made a video of how C was faster than Rust. Yeah, you can make that video for anything. It means nothing, honestly. C, I think, is doing less than Rust. So, like, C doesn't save you from all of the, like, mutable shared reference kind of things, right? So, like, if you want to just access empty memory and, you know, crash your application or whatever, C just lets you do that because it's not preventing you from doing that, whereas the Rust compiler is preventing you from doing that, which makes the application you write more likely to run correctly. But like that happens at compile time, right? Like, so Rust is adding functionality that the C compiler doesn't. But I will say that for any video, for any like X is faster than Y or Y is faster than Z or whatever, you can make that video for any combination of languages, right? Like I could make a video that Rust compiled faster than JavaScript if I was considering, like, I don't want to call anybody out particularly. Next is backed by a company, right? So like a Next.js or like a Gatsby. Gatsby's company is dead, so let's talk about them instead. Or I guess they're not dead, but you know, Gatsby's compiles were known to be slow, right? So a Gatsby site could take 10 to 15 minutes to compile for whatever reason. I'm not going to really get into it. And you could just compare that to a regular, like, I don't know, Zola site or something. And you'd be like, look, Rust is so much faster at compiling than JavaScript. Like, cherry picking use cases isn't very helpful, right? I will say the Rust compile times are well known to the Rust team, and there are people actively working on it all the time, which is great. And the other thing is that Rust does a whole bunch of work at compile time that I actually want to be done. Like I want the Rust compiler to do what it's doing. So like removing that functionality to get a faster compiler isn't a solution in my mind. But if it is, then you can go write C. What was I doing? Oh yeah, right. I was showing the help text stuff. So I've got this thing, right? And this is a clap application. I don't think I have coloring on. I should have coloring on. But there's a couple subcommands, Atlas, Blender. Blender is going to be a headless runner for running my Blender scripts and doing renders. Atlas is for generating that metadata file. And that just uses the same types that I use in the application and basically just reads in all of those files and then creates like the metadata file that I then want to use inside of Bevy. I could do this. I could do this inside of Bevy to some extent. I could do it inside of the asset system. I don't know that that trade-off makes sense for me right now. I think that I would rather, because I'm not going to change these sprite sheets very often, right? So I don't need them to be like part of Bevy's asset loading to have that processing there. But I could if I wanted to, and then it would hot reload and whatever. I think pre-processing these is the way that I want to go for at least this stuff. We'll get into, you know, custom asset loaders and whatever at the time that we do that, whenever that is. But yeah, so we've got to write a system here. I think I was in triggers. So attack timer complete. Blah, 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 attack. Originally meant to be used to end the attacking state. Test to check if the attack timer is complete. So the attack timer, we query for the attacking component, any attacking component, because this applies to anything with an attacking component, which is also something interesting because now we can stick attacking on anything and it would just work. So if the attacking frame is greater than or equal to the maximum number of frames, then we're done, right? Then we go into whatever the next state is. So we've got the attacking state, we've got the trigger to leave the attacking state, and then we need the effectively the same thing as dashing, right? Because dashing is something that will just execute and then stop. So let's grab that. And I basically haven't abstracted any of this code yet because I don't know how specific it's going to be to each state. But the way that it's looking, I'm repeating a lot of like very simple logic. So I think in the future, a lot of like this code right here gets repeated in every system. Getting the direction, I don't know, like movement enabled is in a couple of different systems, like whether movement is possible or not could be a whole different system even. Like the animation tracking is also in this system, and I don't know that it should be. It might go on that, like when we abstract that animation struct from these other structs, I might write a different system that's responsible for actually running the animations. But in this case, this is going to be what the spellcast shoot, I think is what it was called. That's the other thing, like using all of this metadata, I can now access these by name, which is nice. This is all attacking. So like this code here is kind of repetitive, right? Like this, all this is doing right here is tick the timer, increase the frame count, get the facing direction, get the right sprite, put that sprite in the atlas, which is true for every state that we're in. We will always be doing like that sequence. So like that can be broken out into an animation system that just runs all the time instead, which probably makes more sense, honestly. So there's a little bit of refactoring that I'm going to do here, but always, or not always, but like it's very useful to write it all out and see what's actually repeated. Would 8-ray caster help with changing image layers since you can calculate the angle of ray bounce? That would mean that the ray has to hit something in all directions, right? I don't know how that would work. Right? Like if you were, let's run the application actually. You know, sometimes the terminal is just too big to backwards history search. So if we, actually this doesn't run yet because I didn't finish writing my code. Let's finish writing our code and then we'll look at the 8-way stuff in a second. So attack, triggers, we've got dash here. I think that I can get rid of this actually entirely. Let's get rid of dash. Not the dash animation, but let's get rid of this dash specifically. And we can do that because I just upgraded Leaf Wing Input Manager. And now we can do this instead. So this dash and this dash are just trigger tests for whether this action is being pressed. So if dash is being pressed, then we do dashing. And this should make it a little bit more obvious what's going on here. Like, we're testing to see if something is true, and if it is, we're inserting a new component. When that component gets inserted, the systems that are querying for things with those components then run on that thing, which is the player in this case, and create some behavior, right? And then whenever we want to transition out, we just transition out in whatever way we need to. So for this, it's going to be attack, right? I think that the player stuff is framed in terms of like the player action, like the player wants to dash, whereas the systems are the player is idling. Move, dash, interact, recover. So we need an attack here. What is this? This is going to be just attack. And let's see what we've got here. Attaching. Yeah, misspelling things doesn't work. What file is that in? Systems? Does that mean I have other misspellings of attack in here? So I will say the incremental compiles compared to like a full compile are much better. So like I don't really feel incremental issues. So this is, I don't think we have an input map for it. So this is the heal button. We don't have the input map set up. So let's set up the input map. I think I have that in main. Maybe it's in player. I've got a little bit of refactoring to do, if you haven't been able to tell from the multiple times that I've said, oh, I should refactor that. It just goes to show you don't have to write proper code or morally correct Rust to write Rust. You can write whatever the hell you want. So input map. This is how we're defining all of our inputs. I have this defined for keyboard right now and controller, but I am using a controller, so I'm going to have an action here that is the attack action, and the gamepad button is going to be west. The gamepad inputs, north, south, east, west, are, yeah, like, I feel like whenever you talk about like functional programming or something, like like correctness is like a programming term, but people always take that as being like right and wrong, but that's not what it means at all. So that's kind of what I was getting at. Like I never mean right versus wrong. I always mean like correctness in the computer science term. But like if you say things like this is a pure function, people are like, oh, it's morally pure, and you're like, nah, that's not what I mean. I mean it doesn't have side effects. So I try to make sure that I state that because it's really easy with the semantic overlap there to, you know, say something you don't mean. So we've got attack. I think that works. I think that's enough. Let's see if it actually works. What I don't have is controller support for the main menu. So technically it works. This is the downside. We're just permanently attacking. I think that what I've done here is probably forgotten to change some of the dash code. So when we attack, we do west. For systems, if we are attacking, we are looking for the spellcast shoot animation. We are looking for attacking. We are looking for the multi-directional atlas. That's our JSON file. That gives us all the metadata. Base dash speed is not relevant. We actually shouldn't be moving the character at all in this at the current moment anyway. So I'm just going to get rid of the dash speed and whatnot. We actually don't need the linear velocity at that point. So maybe we just get rid of it entirely. ISO direction, are we using that? No, we're not using that because we're not doing actual movement. And then attacking timer delta just finished, attacking frame +1. Sprite base index. This looks more or less correct. So the question then is, our trigger correct? Let's get rid of the dash trigger. Attack timer complete. Query attacking. Spellcast raise is the issue. We are not doing spellcast raise. We're doing spellcast shoot. And these are names that come directly from the animation tracks in Blender, which I actually really like. If I go look at the NLA tracks over here, I know that the UI is pretty small and it's going to be hard for some of you to see this, but like idle and running are the names of the animations. So like for dash here, if I solo dash, you should be able to see that animation playing. If I solo running, I should solo one of the tracks that is actually that length. I think the running is what, 32 frames? No, it's got to be 30. This information is actually here. I'm just not looking at it. It's actually got to be like 28 now that I think about it. Running here. So this is 24. Wow, I was way off. Good thing I'm using files to do this for me. So this running animation is named running inside of Blender, and when this gets rendered, it gets rendered and the metadata goes out as the name running. So if I change the name in here, it will change it in that metadata file, which is nice because that means I can control which animation is being used in Blender, which is pretty cool for a 2D sprite animated game. So let's see if we got this right. Does Bevy have shaders for visual animation, and can you add the characters to Bevy? I need to... The little heart symbol is blocking the last letter of character. Does Bevy have shaders for visual animations? I don't know what shaders for visual animations is. You do have shaders. You have full shader capabilities. Add the shader, add to the character in Bevy. Bevy does have shaders, and we can put a shader on the character. Like that's a total possibility. Actually, we're gonna do that today, I think, if I can get around adding this shoot animation. I think we're gonna add a orb that comes out. Vertex shader for skeletal deformation. We don't have 3D stuff in here. So like actually for like something like Paper Mario, that would be very useful, right? We could move the indices around or something like that. Like you could crumple up a 2D thing or something like that, probably using vertices. That's not the way I'm working with it right now, but you can definitely add shaders to 2D stuff. And we will add shaders to 2D stuff, just to be clear. Okay, so attack timer complete. The problem right now is we're getting stuck in the attacking state. So I'm going to add a debug here. And see what we're getting. Maybe I should add an info to this one. Oh yeah, like you can go all the way down to WGPU if you want to. Hukasu is saying you can create custom pipelines with custom vertex and fragment shaders, and you can create an extended material that uses the PBR pipeline. All of that is true. It looks like the frame isn't incrementing. Did I name this incorrectly? Attacking. Wait, this is named attack. I messed that up, didn't I? No, I don't think I did. Mute attacking. I don't think this system is running though. But yeah, so for shaders for Bevy, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? The biggest things are the material trait. That's probably where most people will start. There is material and material 2D. So material allows you to specify things like a vertex shader and a fragment shader, or a bunch of other things that if you are not familiar with shaders will be very confusing. But basically you have vertex shader, you have fragment shader, you have the alpha mode and some other settings, depth bias. There's a couple of things for like 3D specific stuff, like the view transmission. There's depth and normal prepasses as well as motion vector prepasses. So if you have a 3D camera, you can override these and change that. We have a deferred shading pipeline as well in Bevy. So you can replace the deferred vertex shader or the deferred fragment shader if that's something you're using. That's all possible. And then for the 2D, we have a little bit less available because some of that 3D stuff doesn't translate well. So like you don't have the depth prepass in 2D, so you can't override the depth prepass. This is the easiest way to work with shaders in Bevy. It basically just lets you specify a shader and some data. So it looks like this. You create a custom material. You say, I want like a color in an image. And then you can write your shader. And your shader looks like something like this, right? This is all the bindings for that color that you just saw. And then the sampler for the image. And you can do literally whatever you want in there. This is like a high level abstraction on top of render pipelines and stuff like that. You can do things like manually implement slightly lower level traits like as bind group. You saw we were deriving that in the last one, but if you wanted to specify it yourself, you could. You could drop lower and start adding nodes to the render graph inside of Bevy. Render graph is a whole set of things. And then you could even drop lower and start doing like very raw WGPU stuff. So there's this like whole stack of being able to work with shaders where you start with probably material or material 2D. And then as you need more functionality or stuff that isn't available, you can drop down and do whatever. An old game that has sprites. Each pixel is just a U16 with an index and a palette. Index colors, yep. Wondering if Material 2D can implement that. I think somebody has already implemented that, actually. So not only can you do that, but I don't think you have to specifically. Seldom Pixel, which is made by the same person that state machine thing that we're using, has already done a whole bunch of stuff for indexed color pipelines and whatnot. And this has a bunch of other stuff in it too. So like, if you're doing indexed colors, you probably also want, you know, some of this other stuff. But yes, very possible. You can totally do whatever you want. Where are we? Okay, so we're getting into the attacking phase. We are not getting out of the attacking phase. So let me look at the player state machine that we were creating. If we are in attacking and then attack timer has to complete. So let's take a look at the attack timer complete and see if this is even running. It is running because we're getting here, right? We're getting these debugs out. But the frame isn't incrementing. So that leads me to believe that the system is not actually running. Let's make this really obvious. So let's go attacking. I think we can actually get rid of the other logs, but I'm not going to just yet. All right, so whatever, we hit the button. It spams a little bit. So I don't think this is running. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I don't think I added it. Where's main? Right now, what I'm doing is I'm adding, yeah, I didn't add it. It doesn't, you know what? Systems don't run if you don't add them to run. Big brain tips. Let's get rid of these debugs. If you don't turn the light switch on, it turns out the light will very likely not turn on by itself. Okay, so now we've got this little animation. We are allowed to just kind of like skate, which I kind of like, honestly. I will say also, I didn't realize this because I haven't been holding down dash, but holding down dash just infinitely dashes, which we are going to have to remove. Because if this is in the game, this is how everybody's going to like travel. Actually, let me record that because that's hilarious. All right, we'll just save that for later. Yeah, I am on Mac. So I do all my work on Mac, and then I stream off the PC. I don't know. I like working on Mac. It gives me a good mix of like being Linux-y, so I get all of my like terminal stuff, which I kind of lose out on Windows. And then it gives me like the ability to actually run the games and whatever, and use any software that I want to. Like I'm never gonna have an issue with like DaVinci Resolve not supporting Mac or something like that. So I use a bunch of those kinds of applications, and you know, Blender's running here. We've got the tiled map editor, whole bunch of stuff. I've been using Mac for 15 years. I think I switched to Mac in 2008, 2009. Microsoft is more of a walled garden. That's a really interesting statement. I am not going to argue that one way or the other, but it's just really interesting to think of Microsoft as more of a walled garden than Mac. Often you need some print lines before you make that mistake or realize that mistake. Yeah, I needed some. Sounds like we need that Google Home automation turn on when it's 6. Put a little skateboard on them. Yeah, this will actually not be a roguelike. It'll be a skate game. It's actually Druid Pro Skater 32. Let's see. You say if you start and end your Blender animation in the same pose, you don't have to worry about animation transitions. Yes, but the Blender stuff is like placeholder. Like the Blender stuff that we see right now, like this druid and whatever, is not in any way. This is not the character that's going to be in the game. This is just a model that I'm using to build out the pipeline so that I can do whatever art that I want to do. Similarly, this like tile set that we see on screen right now is not the tile set that I'm going to use. Like there may be a switch, but I'm using the tile set to like implement my Bevy ECS tiled integration with something that should work before I go and make my own art. Also, something worth noticing is that the FPS in this performance overlay will never be more than 60 because my monitor doesn't support it. So the frame time is always maxed out at 16 milliseconds, which is not what happens on Windows. On Windows, this is running in like 4 milliseconds or less. So just to be clear about like, I do have performance metrics up. Don't take them too seriously because it is locked to the monitor at the moment. And this monitor is a 4K, like not gaming, whatever monitor. But I find it useful to do that. So, okay. And then the interact button works. This little like heal action works. We can just kind of cast stuff. The linear velocity either needs to stop here, which we need to put it back into the system, or we need to be able to skate around. I don't know which one I like better, honestly. It is kind of funny that you can like skate around shooting stuff. I don't think that that's going to be the way that this works though. So let's go into systems. I do think that we want, I think the linear velocity was the last thing before the log, right? Yeah, so let's take the linear velocity. LinVel is back. And then linear velocity is not going to be any of this. It's just going to be 0. So we actually still don't need any of this other stuff, but we do need the linear velocity because we do not want to move while we're shooting. It's either move or shoot. It does not move and shoot. And I'm calling it shoot, but it's actually more of a cast in this setup. You do get slight movement if you hold the character, which is really funny. It only blinks in that one angle. So it's only blinking if it's downward. I wonder if I'm off by 1 on that transition. I'll have to fix that at some point. It doesn't happen in any of the others, which is interesting. So we can run around, we can dash, we can attack, and we can kind of like heal or whatever. We can interact with things that doesn't have an animation. We can stand on sensors. We can interact with switches. I think that I want to insert an enemy that we can attack. So the question is, how do we do that? Let's commit first. I want to get better about committing incrementally. I've been doing very large commits, just like whatever I want to, and then commit before stream starts, which is not the best way to do commit messages, just to be clear. Let's see, git commit, attack animation. Cool. I'll just push that up for myself. And then what do I want to do here? I think I want to tie what do we tie enemy spawning to? How would I trigger an event on frame X of an animation, like spawn projectile on frame 18 of attack? I would probably send an event. So for the way that I have stuff set up right now is you can be attacking, right? This is attacking, and we know what frame we're on. There unfortunately is no good way, I don't think, for me to annotate which frame the attack should happen on in Blender. I can't think of a way to get that metadata like from Blender to the metadata file. But that would be probably my ideal situation. Like my ideal situation would be annotate one of the frames or something like that with when the attack should fire. And I think for something like the attack, right? You want it to happen pretty quickly. But in this case, how many frames is this particular animation? I don't even know. 24 if I remember correctly. So if we want it to fire on frame 18, we could do that in the sense of we probably want an input buffer like we were talking about earlier, right? If somebody is, well, we already have the input actually. The only thing in the back of my head that I'm thinking of that is relevant in the current state of things is we have the frame count, so we could fire some arbitrary event here, right? Like attack trigger, like that send like attack event, you know, like this works. And we can wrap this in like if attacking dot frame, you know, is equal to 18 or something. But is there any guarantee that we hit the 18th frame? I don't know that there is. I think that for most computers, most people that are playing this game, they will hit on frame 18. Like there will be a frame 18. I don't know that that's true. So we might want to do something like well, I don't want to do it locally though, right? So maybe we do it in the attack component. So the attack component like has triggered, right? And like there's no guarantee that this is the way that we're going to work for every attack. So let's do this. Has triggered attack. And we'll just say bool. I think this will get rewritten. So let me add a comment here. To do revisit when more attack types are included. So cool. We just have this little to do. This will be false by default. So when attacking gets added to our player entity, we have effectively a 28 frame. Was it 28? I thought it was 24. Anyway, doesn't matter. 28 frame attack. And this is just constructing a struct. So then we need to do something with that struct. We could have trigger on. And this could be like trigger on, right? Which could be an enum, which could be frame 18, right? Trigger on doesn't exist, so I'm just going to define it like as close as possible to this, and then we'll refactor it later. So enum trigger on, right? And this could be frame 18. Frame would be then a U size, right? So this would live here. Trigger on doesn't exist, so let's do trigger on is a trigger on. So theoretically, what I'm thinking here is that it could trigger on a frame. It could trigger on frames, right? So for this purpose, I'll just make this a vec of U sizes. We don't have that currently, so I'm not going to worry about it. But we're gonna trigger on every 18th frame. Then in our system, we're going to have what? Attacking. In here, we now have trigger on and has triggered attack. So let's do if let trigger on frame trigger frame equals trigger on. I think that will work. And then if this, we do if attacking frame is greater than or equal to trigger frame, and we haven't triggered the attack yet, then we will do some kind of send here. Let's make an info. So we'll do the event later. Has triggered attack. We need to set has triggered attack equal to true, so that it doesn't run again until the next system. And this needs to be attacking dot, because otherwise it won't know what we're talking about. And I think that just works. Oop. The trait clone is not implemented for trigger on. Okay. So let's go back into triggers. Actually, triggers wasn't where it was it? Why do we need clone? Clone for... Is that because attacking has clone? Attacking has clone, yeah. So that's fine. So we caused ourselves to need to be able to clone this. And then not found in scope for 322 for systems. Attacking dot Trigger on. Trigger on is not. Oh, private field. Yep, this needs to be pub. This needs to be pub. Then I think that's okay for the enum. Oh no, we need this to be pub. Sorry. And we could write a function here that's like should trigger, and we could run that every frame if we wanted to. If attacking frame, trigger frame, expected U32, because numbers are U32s by default. Is that what's going on here? No, frame is a U32. So trigger frame expected because attacking frame. So let's do as U32 here, because that's fine. We're never going to have stuff that's over a U32 for frame counts, so that will always be safe. I did see some comments about some Blender docs, so I'm going to read that in a second. So we've got attack now. Every time we transition into idle and back into attacking, we can get one attack on frame 18. So that looks like it's working. So now we would just need to send the event instead of logging something out. And we could spawn whatever we wanted to. So that's how, I think, in the way that we have everything set up, I think that's how I would choose a frame to attack on. I would love to have that in the metadata, though. I do want to, like, put that in Blender. So I don't know if it's Rom or Rome, but Rom's saying that from their docs, Blender seems to have markers to denote frames with key points or significant events. Okay, cool. To get the frame number, you can probably add and name a marker animation and access those markers in Python. That's interesting. Can you split up the animation into more actions so you go from dodge start to dodge attack window to dodge end? Yes, absolutely. We could totally do that. That is not like a thing we can't do. It's just, you know, we just have to do it. I don't know that I'm going to need specialized, like, enter exit animations. But we actually, speaking about enter and exit, the state machine that we're using, seldom state, actually supports on enter and on exit. So on enter some state, do something, you know, that could be where we kick off the enter animation or something. You know, we could on enter play the entry animation, transition to the actual state after that, and then on exit do a different animation. I don't think I'm gonna mess around with markers this stream because that seems like a lot of probably reading docs. But if I can drop, like, what are we? Where's our attacking spellcast shoot? T-pose spellcast shoot. So here, let's do this. We're on frame 18. What if I right click here? If I right click, rename, duplicate, split, meta. Okay. So it's not trivial. If it was going to be like right click, add marker, I might have tried it. But I do not know exactly what this is going to cost to implement. So I'm going to do it off stream and then I don't know, make a video about it or something. I feel like you can just use the beginning of a new track to denote when you can attack. What do you mean by the beginning of a track? To be clear, I'm not worried about transitional animations right now. The question earlier was how do we trigger on a particular frame? And we can do that using like a little bit of code to determine whether this animation has passed that frame or not. If it has, then we can trigger. And if it hasn't, then we can't. And in this case, I think nobody's going to be running at 5 frames per second without knowing that there's something horribly wrong, right? So this animation lasts 18 frames. I don't think we need to actually care about what happens if somebody is running at 6 frames per second and just like misses a whole chunk of frames. Start attack is from 0 to 18 and end attack is from 18 through whatever, and have an on enter end attack that spawns the projectile. Yeah, we could totally do any number of things like that. Absolutely. There's nothing preventing us from taking any of those approaches. And I think actually we've got this trigger on here, right? I think that what's actually going to end up happening is we'll make this a little bit more generic, right? Because we could trigger anything on any frame, right? So probably when we do the separate animation system, a lot of this code will get removed from these structs and they'll turn more into marker structs. And then we'll be able to just arbitrarily trigger on any frame. Hopefully that trigger data will come from Blender because I want it to come from the asset, not be hard-coded in the code like it is right now. But for now, like the code still has to exist for like us to be able to trigger on something. And I'm okay hard coding it for now. So let's do that. Let's create a new event, right? I have this like events crate. I don't know that I'm going to keep this events crate around, but let's say an attack event, right? Let's name that start game event in the docs. Attack event represents an attack of some type. We don't know what kind of attack this player is going to have yet. I do want you to be able to like have different kinds of attacks. Like we're going to implement one attack right now, which is probably just going to be like a forward ball cast kind of thing, like a fireball. But you should be able to do other things with your attack as well. It should have different effects, whatever. So just keeping that in mind. Just to be clear, this is not a 3D game. DBZ Mike. This is a 2D game. There are no GLBs in this entire system. We're not using GLTF at all. I've actually had a couple people already be confused that this is not a 3D game. Which I guess means I'm doing something right because this is all 2D. This is a 2D isomorphic game. This is not 3D. And you can tell right now because, like, for example, I'm behind this pole, which is correct. I'm behind that pole, which is correct. I guess I'm behind all those things. But, like, I can go under the stairs. I'm not supposed to go under stairs. But that's just because it's on a different layer and I have the index set to, like, 2 instead of 3 right now. How many directions does the character have? The character can move in any direction. The sprites have 32 directions. So you'll see like Well, I don't know if you can actually see. Can I make this any bigger? I could change the camera too, but I think I have... Camera. We're going to make this HDR at some point too. Camera 2D. Where's the orthographic projection? Scaling mode, fixed vertical. Let's just... Can we just zoom? Nope, other way. Zoom. Zoom. All right. The character's real big now. You can see if we zoom in really far that triggers the sprite transition between those two angles. That is the smallest angle at which you can... you'll see the raycast is moving smoothly if I can hold my thumb in the right position, but the sprite itself has to pick between those two angles. So it works out pretty well. It's not an even level of increment. It's an isomorphic or isometric increment, which I can actually show. I'm really big in this project on building little tools to help me out. And one of the things that I was having a lot of trouble with was figuring out what the angle increments were in the isometric projection. I don't know what LBA is, Mike. But yes, absolutely. Like Paper Mario is 2D, like Mario, and 3D World. You know, like that's totally a thing that happens. But everything in this game is 2D. They're all sprites. Everything is sprites. I think my next game is probably going to be 3D, because working on this makes me appreciate like the art of Tunic, for example. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Tunic, but Tunic is a true 3D game. I don't want people in tunics. I want Tunic. So it looks like this. Can we open this image in a new tab so I don't have to click into... So it looks like this, which is isometric, but is true 3D. So everything is a model. And I really appreciate doing it all in 3D now more than I did before. Because yes, this means that you need to deal with all the models and everything, but doing true 3D also means that you get all of the really nice like rendering improvements and whatnot. So like Bevy has volumetric fog and God rays. Those are just going to be in 0.14. They have global illumination based on light probes that you can bake out of Blender. Like, there are some really advanced rendering features that I would love to use, but don't apply to 2D. So I can't do like a 3D volumetric fog in 2D. I would have to hack it in some way. This is the isometric debug tool that I wrote. So basically all this is doing is taking Bevy gizmos, and on the left-hand side, you have all of the regular angle increments, which is an even number of increments. So that's tau over 32 radians. I don't know what degree count that is. Probably, yeah, it's probably like 11.25, something like that. But when we apply the projection, 0, which is to the right for the angle, right, for regular, turns into like southeast. So this one is now 0 and it goes around. So you can see how this works for 8 directions, for 16 directions, and our implementation is 32 directions. So this is how many places the sprite can look. And this was super helpful. I think it's a little hard to see the white on green over here, which is interesting. The pink works out a lot better with the white. But yeah, you can see how every angle corresponds to its isometric projection, which means that they aren't actually an even number of degrees. Let's get rid of tunic here. I think in the Python script, I actually have that list. And actually, now that I look at it, that debug tool also spits out the list of angles. So if you want to look at the radians, these are all the radians. So you can see that this moves up like 0.1, but a different one like this moves up by like 0.2 or 3. You're building a game for Rust learning purposes. Also, I want to share the game eventually, which is easier, 2D isometric or 3D. I would say whichever is easier is which you have more experience in. If you don't have experience in either of them, then I would base it on something else. Like, are you a person who does 2D art? Then you might want to do 2D isometric because it may be a little easier. Now, the one thing that I do have to say about 2D isometric is I had to write the tiled integration myself. So if you want to build your own levels using a widely available level editor, you might have to deal with that. I don't think 2D isometric is particularly easy as a first project unless you are comfortable cutting a lot of corners. And when I say that, what I mean is if I run the game right now, right, and we go in, there is a way in which the player has to be behind this box over here, but also in front of the box over here. So if you are comfortable with every tile being full, if that makes sense, then 2D isometric can be fine. Bevy ECS tile map works very well as long as things are full blocks. So my tile size right now is the size of this down here. So if I'm this little area I'm running around, like these 4 like subdivided tiles with the darker gray line around them, that's the size of my tile, which is 128 by 256, or the other way. So if I put anything inside of this tile that I want to interact with, that kind of thing is easier to do into 3D, right? If you want to just have arbitrary poles placed in arbitrary places and not have to deal with the Z indexing at all, 3D is easier. If you are going to do something like Hades, and Hades 2, I don't know if I want to Google image search Hades. Here's an image that'll work. So if you look at this Hades 2 level, this is 2D isometric, but you'll notice that there's nothing here that you can stand behind in the way that I just showed standing behind that box. Right? This is just like open space. There's a collider along this whole left edge here, and it spans around this whole area here. So if you're just going to build an open world, 2D isometric is fine. I don't think you're going to need to do anything special. You might run into some Z indexing issues if you make some decisions that lean that direction. That's the huge caveat with the 2D isometric stuff. I think that from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know how anything works yet, from like a beginner's perspective, from somebody who maybe hasn't built games yet, I think 3D is probably easier because it lines up in your head correctly. I will say that if you do 3D, then you also need to learn modeling and rigging and animating, skeletal animation, and like all of this other stuff. So like, I don't think in total either of them is like easier, right? They both have their own challenges. I will say that Bevy has gotten a lot of really, really interesting 3D rendering features in the last like 3 months. So one of the things I do is This Week in Bevy, and I don't know that we got much last week, actually. The 0.14 release is coming like very soon, so things are kind of slowing down a little bit. But like depth of field and God rays and stuff like that, like this depth of field effect, trivial in 3D because it's just a component. Like you slap a component onto your 3D camera and suddenly you have depth of field. Like volumetric fog, you drop two components onto two different things and like you have volumetric fog and like God rays, which is wild. Like just being able to turn this kind of stuff on without needing to code any of it other than like adding a component is absolutely wild. And a lot of that has landed fairly recently. There's clear coat stuff. So where's the clear coat stuff? Clear coat, I didn't add a clear coat image. I should have added a clear coat image. I'll go to the PR. Oh, does the PR not? Oh, there we go. So clear coat is another thing where like they are constantly adding more GLTF features. And clear coat is that like if you have a marble that has a clear coat on top of it. So yeah, I don't know. I would probably push you in the direction of 3D if you are comfortable like learning a whole bunch of stuff. And 2D isometric is got its own challenges. But if you're more comfortable with like 2D things, like if you want to draw something in Procreate, then you're going to have to make that trade-off in that decision yourself. There's also something called irradiance volumes that is like a voxelized pre-baked global illumination that I have the docs up here for, but I haven't actually gotten into yet. But yeah, I don't know. I would probably tell somebody to go with 3D if they were deciding in sum total. I just find this 2D isometric interesting conceptually. So that's why I'm doing it. Do you have documented how you integrated tiled into Bevy ECS tile map? I do not currently. I might make a separate video or split that crate out or something in the future. Bevy ECS tile map has a tiled example, and that's where I would point somebody. So where's tiled? Tiled. So there's a crate called RS tiled, and inside of Bevy ECS tiled map, there is this tiled example. And this tiled example, I think, uses this tiled file. And if you just use this tiled file, it works pretty much, more or less. So that's what I would start with if I was going to do that. But I don't have the customizations that I've done documented yet. Good evening. Just two components. Let's see. I was talking about, what was I talking about for just two components? I was talking about what, volumetric fog. Let's go for God rays and depth of field. So the PR here talks about the two components. So there's volumetric fog and volumetric light. You need to pass volumetric light onto the directional light, and volumetric fog goes onto like, I think an area, like a cube kind of thing. There is an example in the Bevy docs or the Bevy repo. So if you're interested in the volumetric fog and the God rays, that is documented. Am I going to make a guide on collisions? What kind of guide on collisions do you need? I can totally make a collisions guide, but like, what I typically point people to is Bevy XPBD 2D. You can also use Rapier, but basically the idea here is like, there are colliders and you add the colliders and you define whether they're rigid bodies or not, and then they'll collide. And there's a lot of documentation here. Oh, the new bounding volumes. Yeah, I mean, I think that I will make a video on that. There's a lot coming in 0.14, and I'm thinking about how I'm going to do um, like a series of videos for a bunch of this stuff. You asked me 2 streams ago and you scheduled the video. Yeah, I put it on my list. I looked at it. We were talking about it on that stream, and you said that you were going with Bevy XPBD, if I remember correctly. I did take a look into it. We only have bounding volumes, right? So for the new AABB stuff, there's bounding circle, if I remember correctly, and AABB TD, which isn't terribly useful. This is the wrong docs to look at to show that off, but like, I don't know. Like the collisions are stuff that I need to talk about for 0.14 in a new video. So I will eventually make a video on that. 3D is overkill for the game, but easy for the level. Cool. Yeah, Pong and Snake are easy. Yep, Pong and Snake and 2048 and other things like that are great starting points, I think. Interesting. This log is interesting. One iteration of a force feedback loop took more than 50 milliseconds. I don't have force feedback enabled. Okay, so we've got this attack event. What does the attack event need to hold? I guess the entity that is attacking. I don't know that I want it to have any like information about what attack can be. I don't know. I haven't decided. I've made 0 decisions. Let's just make it like attacking entity. And what direction they're facing, maybe? This feels weird. Like attack direction feels like something that we should do in a different way. But let's do attack event. And then we'll fire this off and write a different system to use it. So animation triggers, systems inside of attacking, we have this attack now. Instead of that, we're going to do an attack event. We do need to bring this in. We do need to fill the struct fields. This does need to be attack events.send. So we need the entity and the direction. I think facing is the direction. So we have that already, and we already have the entity. So let's do entity here and facing here. Facing.0 is probably what I need, actually. Entity, I don't know why those are not happy. I think those are not public. That's the issue. You get pretty good at recognizing issues without even looking at the compiler output, honestly. I need to document these. I'm trying to get better about documenting everything. The entity that triggered the attack and the direction the attack is going to move in. Systems attacking, yada yada, entity facing. So now we just need to have the writer here. So attack events, mute attack events is going to be an event writer for attack event. And then we need an event reader for attack events somewhere. Which I'll probably just put in main for the moment, because I'm just going to write a little bit of quick debug code. Attack event handler, we'll use this, yada yada. Event reader is what we need here. And then for event, I guess we'll call this for attack event. We'll destructure here equal or in attack events dot read. I think that's good. And then this I want to fill structs for, but I think I can't do that unless I wrap it in a parenthesis, which feels weird, but there's something off about the way this is working. Am I calculating the distance of the raycast to interact object? We are currently not calculating the distance. We get the distance of all of the intersections. So actually that's the system right below this that we happen to be staring at. So I can just cover that for a second. So we have a raycaster component here, and we have the ray hits component that is filled in by Bevy XBB2D. So anything with a raycaster fits this query. We iterate over any of these queries. So we've got a raycaster and hits. For every hit in the raycast, we kind of find the closest one. I think we're finding the closest one here. Iter sorted, find map hit. Yeah, we're finding the closest one that I think has the ability to be interacted with in this system. So we're not doing a distance calculation. We're just checking to see if the component exists on the thing that we hit. And if it does, then we actually just have the distance and whatever. And right now, all we're doing is logging that out. But we could fire in another event there. That's how we're going to do like chest openings and stuff, I think. Attack event needs to come in. That's why it wasn't filling. Okay, it wasn't the parens. The parens, I don't know, are required. Yeah. Okay, so attack event handler reads attack events. For every attack event, we get an entity and a direction. So let's do like attack, yada, yada, yada. Attacking entity, attacking direction. We'll make this an info. We need to add attack event handler somewhere to actually process. So let's just add it in the update with everything else. This looks like it should be formatted, but it doesn't look like it's formatting. So rip. Dashing. Unfortunately, there's no snow. So attack event handler here, and I think that that is enough if I've done everything correctly and I wasn't too distracted. Attack direction. Where's this? Attack events, attacking entity, attacking direction. No, attack direction. Why did I name one of them with ing and one of them not? I gotta go back and I gotta go back and change that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Yada yada. So now we're panicking. Oh, I didn't register the attack event. You know what? The entire purpose of this like extra crate was to like function as an event registry. And I just totally forgot that that was the purpose of this crate. I think that having all of the events that can be generated by the application in a different crate is really interesting from the perspective of like, if I want to add functionality, I can kind of just go look. So it looks like we are getting attacks, right? So attack, direction, that direction with this entity. I guess we don't really need the entity per se. We really need like a direction for it to start from. But let's go with the entity for now. Let's do, where is this? In main. What do we do for the actual attack? we need to launch an attack, and then we need to have like, let's call this fireball handler or something. So this is going to be a query for like fireballs. Fireball will need a direction, I guess. We're probably going to want to have it do some auto like tracking stuff, but I'm just going to ignore that for now. So we're going to have a direction that it goes in. This is going to be a component because we need to attach it to some entity. This entity is going to have a direction, and then we can also get the transform. So we need to query for fireball, and we need the, this is going to be a shared reference to a fireball because we don't need anything else. We do, however, need a mutable transform so that we can actually move it. And this will do what? I guess we don't even need to spawn anything yet, really. We could do gizmos. Because we could do either gizmos or we could do meshes. Let's start with gizmos. Where are we? 10 o'clock? Cool. Let's do mute gizmos. Gizmos. I think gizmos are really cool, and we haven't shown them off yet. So let's start with that. So when we attack, I think that I might even ignore the attacking entity for now and just use the direction. So when this happens, what we need to do is commands.spawn. And what we are going to spawn is an entity with a spatial bundle. Actually, we need commands.entity, attacking entity. What is the, I always forget what this is. Visibility is all going to go away. Global transform will be default. Transform is going to be whatever transform we get back here. I think this is called get component. I don't remember. I haven't added it to our actual query yet, so I don't get autocomplete yet. So let's try to debug that here. We'll need to not move it. So we do the shared reference. Fireball handler needs to go into update up here because we want our fireballs to actually move at some point. And then this needs commands or it's not going to work. And then does that run? What did I forget? Consider a semicolon here. A semicolon on 185. Ah, for the spawn. Yes, that makes sense. This needs to be the actual entity. And then I don't think this is get component. I can't for the life of me remember which thing to use here. Insert log components, push children, retain. I can't remember how to do it that way. So I'm going to do it the way that I remember how to do it, which is query for transform. And then use that as a database. There is a way that you can just get that component arbitrarily. I just don't remember the function name. So this should be always working. So I'm going to unwrap that for the moment. Well, let's try this again. Expected that, so we can do that. Dereference it. So we've got this, and then we've got Fireball. Fireball then sets up a fireball with a translation, rotation, whatever. So we're good there. And then this is fireball. And we need attack direction. And I think that needs to be dereferenced, but let's make sure it does. Okay, that looks like it's going to compile, so I'm going to do a gizmo here. What is our gizmo? Circle? Circle 2D? Something like that? Ellipse? Sphere? Circle 2D uses a vec2, an f32, and a color. I think that's what we want. Position, radius, color. So this is for fireball. Fireball, transform, in query. Circle 2D. Position is going to be transform .xy. We actually want to project this. So I'm going to add a to do add projection. The radius is going to be, let's just make it like 100 for now. And the color will be red, I think, because it's a fireball. Let's see. Why don't you use Unity to do game development? Maybe it's possible to use Rust as a language for other engines. It is possible to use Rust for other engines. Ooh, as I hiccup. There's actually a like integration with Godot, which is probably the direction I would go if I was going to use a second engine. So there's this whole Godot Rust project, and like you can just interact with Godot via the native extensions. I don't use this myself, but it's there, it exists, and it works. I don't think I would go with Unity today unless I was already embedded in the Unity ecosystem, and I'm just not. Like, I don't think that their licensing works out in a way that is beneficial for me. I know that there's been people who do educational work that are now concerned about like if they can distribute their like Unity applications and stuff like that, or if they're going to have to pay or whatever they're going to have to do. So like Unity just isn't for me a healthy platform. Fireball, 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 fireball. So many fireballs. They're not moving, but that wasn't the point. So let's make them, I don't know, size 10, make them a little smaller. We do need the projection. I use the projection when we're doing transforms. So let me grab that quickly. What I think I want an abstraction in this project to determine whether I have a projection that is regular XY or is isometric. I think that that's actually going to be reasonably useful as I start thinking about the number of places I have like a 2D direction and coming back to that code later. Where was I? I was in main, right? So for main, what we've got is this transform in that direction. So what we want here is the isometric direction of the transform. Right? No, of the direction. Where's our direction? It's on Fireball. Fireball direction. So Fireball direction XY projected into the isometric projection will give us a slightly different movement like we looked at earlier with the debugger. Using this direction, we can then do transform translation. What do we do here? And we need to do it by time, right? I always forget how to scale it by the delta. I'm just setting velocity for other things. Maybe I just set velocity. That makes more sense, I think. Rather than doing not the projection, but rather than doing the math myself, I think what I want to do is just grab the linear velocity here. Let's see, mute linvel linear velocity. I don't remember. Linear velocity. And then I guess, do we need transform at that point? We don't need transform at that point. I broke something. What did I break? Linear velocity looks fine. Oh, and mute. So we've got a fireball with a linear velocity. That means that this needs to have linear velocity on it. The other thing that I'll mention here is that if we're doing that, then we don't need gizmos, because I can do a circle with some radius. We have an ellipse. I think the ellipse is really what we want, because we want it to be like 2 to 1, I think. So half width is going to be, I think, 10. And half height is going to be 5. And I think that gives us a collider that is the correct sizing for the isometric projection. Because it's not a true isometric projection. It's a 2 to 1 ratio. Fireball attack direction. So we don't need the transform because we're not using it. This is going to be linvel. And then linvel dot velocity is the iso direction. Let's keep that iso direction, and let's do let velocity equals iso direction. Like times fireball speed? Let's get some variables in here. And fireball speed, let's just make like fireball speed 10. I don't know. Maybe this needs to be a vec2, now that I think about it. So vec2 splat 10. No, iso direction is already a vec2, so we can just do 10. So velocity times fireball speed, linvel is set. The gizmos, while they're amazing, we already have gizmos from our physics debug. So maybe we don't do that just yet. We do need diamond position and tile map grid size from the Bevy ECS tile map crate. We run this. And then hopefully we have fireballs that launch. Looks like they're still just staying in place. Is that because they are colliding with me? I haven't set up collision layers or anything yet, so that would be kind of unsurprising. I think we don't have a linear velocity. I thought for some reason that I thought it was added by Bevy XPBD for some reason, but I guess not. We don't have a rigid body or anything on here, so it shouldn't be stopped by our personal player collider. So we're just kind of placing them in the world at this point. Is there a reason that we aren't operating on them? Query for firewall and linear velocity. Gizmos. We don't need gizmos anymore. Let's do info fireball handler to make sure the system is running. Because this has fireball and it has linear velocity. And it has a spatial bundle. Fireball handler is running. So are we getting any fireballs then? Let's do debug formatter for fireball, which I think I don't actually have derived. So we need to derive debug. We run. LDTK is great for 2D. If they're the same for 3D, Blender is where you're going to go. Is the movement just so small that we can't see it? Let's bump the speed up here. Let's change it to 100. There's a if you're using Bevy, there's a Bevy Blender components workflow set of plugins that is really cool. If you're using something else, then that other thing probably has, like you were saying, you were talking about Unity earlier, right? Unity has its own editor. Godot has its own editor. For Bevy right now, I would say just use Blender. Fireball direction, velocity, linear velocity, X, Y. It's not moving when it lands. So maybe we do collider ellipse, linear velocity 0, fireball attack direction, transform. Let's just do transform. Let's clone this. Let's do translation. And here we'll do what? Attack direction times, I don't know, some number is going to be our offset. Trans.translation.x plus equals offset.x. Trans.translation.y plus equals offset.y. So that should put it offset from the player a little bit. That will confirm whether or not we are colliding with ourselves, which I don't think we're doing. I think I made a different mistake, but I don't know exactly where that is. Attack direction times 10. Can't multiply direction 2D by float? Oh, because it needs to be dot as vec3. We basically need to get it out of the direction 2D because the direction 2D is a normalized vector. Okay, so now when we drop this, it drops a little below. Still is not moving. You're going to transpile Blender and combine it with Bevy? Good luck. So we have these directions and we have the linear velocity. Why is the linear velocity not applying? We are also doing linear velocity for player. What does player have on it that our colliders don't? Collider, linear velocity, player. I think we do player somewhere in here. In setup. I never want to search my files inside of VS Code. I don't know why it even has that as a functionality. So sprite bundle, texture atlas, input, facing, player, state machine, kinematic. I don't think we need it to be a rigid body to have linear velocity applied to it, do we? Maybe that is true. Maybe I forgot that. I didn't think that was true. Play. Oop, I think it worked. So it works now. We're just running way too fast. So I think let's get rid of the offset here. And let's do a fireball speed of something way slower. Fireball's running. There's our fireball. You can fire in any direction. Bang, 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 bang. And then what this is effectively going to be when we get around to it is this is not going to be just a collider. It's going to be a sprite sheet that looks like a fireball when we send it. Oh, look at that. It hits the fucking, oh, it hits the crate already. That's cool. I guess these should be, I feel like dynamic isn't the wrong thing. But we do need to like decide how these should behave when they collide with stuff. Cause like, I think if we put one in here, it'll just stick inside. So like we can just kind of gather fireballs in this corner, which is hilarious. Okay, so we've got fireballs. We're not shooting them at anything yet. I don't know that kinematic is the right type of rigid body to put on those. I know that dynamic and stuff are not. Maybe sensors. Maybe we should be firing sensors. The ray is interacting with the fireball. It will not. It will not prevent. Look at how no matter how many fireballs are between me and the thing, we can still interact with that box. And that's because we're doing the raycast and checking for the interact component on that crate. So we actually can't interact with the fireball because it doesn't have the interact component on it. So even though the raycast hits the fireball, it cannot actually ever interact with the fireball. That could be a cool mechanic though. Like fire your fireball and then interact with it. But I don't think that would be a fun mechanic because it seems like it's too accurate, right? It's like too accuracy based. Also, we're not despawning the fireballs ever, which is probably important at some point. But I'm generally pretty happy with the way this is working because it looks like they are firing on the 2D plane. And then these will just be sprites with, let's actually do a sprite. I think the sprite will probably be the last thing we do for the stream today. Ew. I emptied the bottom of my cold brew bottle today, and there's just like some gunk in the bottom, and I've been drinking out of that cup. Ugh. Can you speed up the fire rate double after fire? Yeah. I mean, the fire rate can be as fast as we want it to, right? Like, so fire, like double is 4. Oh, you mean like fire and then it goes? Yeah, we could do that. I would need to add another timer in, which I don't know that I want to do right now. Because we would need to like trigger a timer. The timer would expire, and then we would change the speed. The other thing we could do is add an easing to it, right? So the longer it exists, the faster it moves, which is also a very valid option. But I also think I'm not going to do that right now. I think I want to get an image for the fireball showing. Which should be pretty easy. Because I think what we're going to do here is a material mesh 2D bundle. So let's do Bevy examples, shaders. We'll create our first material 2D shader. And then what we need here is this specifically, which also includes our transform. So we don't need the spatial bundle anymore because this is going to be our transform. This, we don't really want a rectangle. I want, well, TBD. Let's start with a circle. I don't know if I want a circle or a rectangle. I think the rectangle probably makes, honestly, more sense right now. So this is a custom material. It's going to be blue. This is a color texture. We're not going to use a texture right now. So all of this is going to work out just fine. We do need to, let's do fireball material. That's what we'll call this. Which OS am I using to, this is a Mac. I'm using a Mac to do development. So we're going to grab this and this, which is our implementation for the shaders. This also needs to be added to our plugins. So like maybe, I think I'm going to do this right here for now, and I'm going to abstract it into a different crate so that other crates can have, that wasn't the phrasing that I wanted to use, so that materials for different fireballs and stuff can all be kind of like developed on their own without the game. So let's do fireball material. We don't have a shaders folder, so we need to grab that shader. We have a linear RGB here. We are going to have to change the linear RGB because this is a 0.14 concept. So this is actually going to be a color for us for now. In 0.14, that changes to linear, which I think is a good change because it's less obvious that that's what's happening in 0.13. So we've got a rectangle with a fireball material. We've got our fireball material. We need to register our fireball material, and we need to have a shader. So this is how we register. Wow, these two desktops are so far away. I'm going to move this way over here. So in our plugins, we need to add a new set of plugins. This will be fireball material, right? And then we need our comma there, and we need the shader as well. So I just moved that and then I went all the way back to the end anyway. So Bevy has in the assets, in shaders, the custom material 2D shader, which is very basic, but will actually break for us because I'm not copying two files in. So in assets, I'll create a new folder called shaders and a new file called fireball.wgsl. And we are not going to do this import thing, even though we could. We're not going to use a sampler, even though we could. We are not going to texture sample or use the color multiplier. We're just going to have the material color. So what we should end up with is a blue rectangle, is what I'm looking at. Oh, this needs to go inside of shaders. I think I'm going to rename this to material fireball. I think that makes a lot more sense. And then our asset system is going to be responsible for loading material fireball. And I think that we've done everything we need to do to get a blue rectangle to show up. Shader ref, color material. Oh, this is for custom material. We don't have custom material anymore. We have fireball material. Where is material 2D? There it is. Bring that in. Material mesh 2D bundle also needs to come in. So rectangle might not actually be in 0.13, so that might be an issue for us. Missing global transform view visibility because we don't have the default. And then as bind group is not implemented because I messed something up. I actually have shader code in this project already, so I'm not too worried about this. It's very loud outside. Materials. So we don't have materials in our system, which we're adding in. So materials is this, which is our assets. And that is where we're spawning the fireball. So attack event handler. And this is fireball material. And the only thing that you can do currently is fireball. So it's the only attack in the game. We'll split this out, abstract it up a little bit. Trait is not implemented because material plugin is not what I need. I need material 2D plugin. Is that true? Yes, it is. Yada yada. That's because our fireball material doesn't implement as bind group, which triggers the error. As bind group isn't even in scope. So that's sick. The rendering stuff doesn't come with its own prelude, so we do need to import each thing kind of manually, which is a little bit annoying. I wish there, I don't know that I wish there was a rendering prelude. I think it's fine the way it is, honestly. Okay, so attacks, meshes, we're adding our rectangle mesh in here. Does that clean everything up? Basically, I just went through and imported all the things that we needed to import, yada yada. So theoretically, I think that should be holding our thing. But you recently bought a Mac after Linux, and it was really tough to learn the new way in Mac OS. Can you please show keyboard shortcuts, please? I think the biggest difference is just Command C, Command V. I think everything else is just regular. I also have a bunch of custom stuff, so I don't know how much that's actually going to help if I show shortcuts. Okay, so Fireball rectangle default. Is rectangle default not big enough? Half size. Let's make this huge. Is there any reason this wouldn't be showing up? It has spatial invisibility stuff on it already. Oh, this needs to be a Vec2. Vec2 splat. Let's splat it at 50 because it's going to be 100 big anyway. Which makes it a pretty big fireball. So I don't know that we're going to use a shader for this in general, but here's our fireballs. Bang. Our blue square fireballs, which is kind of hilarious. So we could go into the shader and do some mucking around a little bit. I think what is the SDF of a sphere? It's length minus radius. So origin at 0, 0. Let's see, SDF circle. This is not going to be exactly what we need, but length of point minus r. I think we're doing it at the center, but we need to recenter the coordinates if I remember correctly. So let's do mesh.uv minus, let's say 0.5. And we'll make this a let SDF equals this. We'll do return vec4 SDF for the first 3 channels and then 1.0 for the final. Although we probably will end up changing that. I think UV needs to change because it's 0 to 1 from top left to bottom right, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. So actually, let me show what this does first, probably, and then we'll change it, because otherwise it'll just all be in my head. That is not showing anything. I messed up that bad, huh? Mesh UV minus 0.5. Let's do mesh.u mesh.v. Let's get rid of this fireball log too. This fireball log is very, 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 very noisy. We added the projections, so we can just get rid of that. So play, fire this. That was our issue right there. Invalid field accessor U. This is one of the big issues with shaders in general right now. It's not that like whatchamacallit, it's not that shaders are particularly hard for some reason. It's just that the debug process for a shader failing is just nothing outputs. Like that is like the way that shaders fail, which is not Not good, because it makes it really hard to debug. But my issue right now is that I'm trying to access the UV coordinates in the fragment shader, and that is not how you do that currently. So I need to find the sprite 2D definition for vertex output. So maybe we do struct vertex output as a search instead. I want and. Can we do and? Struct and vertex output, shader defs. I guess those are technically in the same file. I don't understand how GitHub search works, honestly. It's so much more confusing than using like ripgrep or something. So we've got 36 files. One of these is going to be in the sprite 2D. I could just go into the sprite directory and find it. Now that I think that this is actually taking longer than I think would have. So vertex output should have UV here. And this is mesh 2D. So mesh 2D vertex output should have a UV in it. So what am I accessing here? Mesh vertex output, your vertex output UV. I thought UV should work. Maybe there's an issue with, oh, you know what? It's probably UV is a vec2 now that I think about it. So it's mesh.uv.u, not mesh.uv. I don't know why I thought that was supposed to work like that. Okay, so we still have an issue here. Invalid field accessor. What am I doing wrong? I'm doing something like just very sillily wrong. I have some shaders in my start menu. So maybe I go look at my Ivy start menu shaders. Here's loading. This is for UI stuff. This is also for UI stuff. So that's not. Yeah, I'm using X and Y for the shader in my other examples. I don't know why I thought U and V would work. I feel like they should. But I think these are actually X and Y. Hey, Jacob, how's it going? Is there an LSP for WGSL? Kind of. I think people are working on it is the issue. Entry point is invalid. Interesting. Why is my entry point invalid? Expects 4, but 5 were given. Is SDF a vec2? I guess it is, right? So let's do 0 here. So this is going to give us like a little rainbow bit of rectangle. So now we're doing the UV coordinates. It's kind of funny because now I'm shooting rainbow squares. Happy June. Yeah, it's .x, Xavier. You're absolutely right. Okay, so UV minus this, so should this work? So that's what an SDF vaguely looks like when you use that. I think we need to do the length here. And I think it's called length. I never remember my shader functions, honestly. So it's len. So SDF is now a singular number, so we can just use it again here. I put a random semicolon on my thing over there. So there's our circle. You see how that is in the top left corner? That's because our 0, 0 coordinate is in the top left. And I think I actually have hot reloading on, so let's check that. Let's do a little bit of red here. Ooh, actually, it looks like, where was that? So I don't know what I did, but I did something that broke the file watching on Mac. So that's my fault. It's supposed to work. So for SDF, this is going to be a 0 to 1 value. And what we want to do here is this UV coordinate needs to be recentered effectively. So to do that, we're going to take 0, 0 needs to be if I remember correctly, this is going to be 0.5, negative 0.5. Yeah. I always forget my coordinate systems working between all of these different areas. So that's centered on the Y, and then this also needs to be subtracted. So now we have a circle in the right position. And this is just like kind of debugging anyway. So we can do what material color dot XYZ times SDF, but we could also do SDF here, which should, if I have everything set up correctly, which I only kind of do. What is it? 1 minus SDF? Because we want the white areas to be... So now we've kind of got that alpha on the outside. And what do we want to do with this? This is going to be mesh.uv minus 0.5. This is our radius, so we could do 2.5 here if we wanted to. And this is still going to be very smooth because SDFs are fields. So we got, you know, a circle inside of the middle of this, and then I want a hard edge. So I think we have to clamp. I don't remember offhand how to do that exactly. I think we also need to do 1 minus SDF there to get the white on the inside, which is not the color we want, right? We want this like bluey kind of thing going on here. Also note that because it's an SDF, because I'm doing 1 minus, that we're getting a ring and not actually like a filled in circle. So let's do 1 minus SDF here, right? And then how do I clamp it? I think I just do the step, right? I forget how step works though. So let's go take a look at the WGSL docs. Because we don't want smooth step, because I don't really want that faded edge right now. I just want it to be 1 or 0. So step, edge, and T, I think, returns 1 if edge is less than X. and 0 otherwise. So I think if we do this, we do step SDF, no, step 0.1 SDF would give us like a reasonably thin line. So now we've got a circle cut out, unfortunately. So let's do 1 minus SDF to get that circle. That didn't work. Why didn't that work? What am I doing wrong here? One minus the step, I think, is actually what we wanted there. Because I want the inner circle. Yeah, there we go. So now we've got this little orby thing going on. It's like a little fireball. We could probably make that smaller too at some point. The SDF, the material color. We've got this weird blue that we're using. What else? We're not doing the projection. So we could still do the projection. I think squashing the coordinates would actually be enough for the projection. We're also not shading it, right? So we could do all of that stuff. I think actually what I'm going to do in the end is not exactly what I'm doing here. So I'm doing an SDF here, sign distance field. And what I really want to do is actually render out something from Blender, I think. So I'm either going to render out something from Blender or I'm going to write a significantly more complicated shader here. But this gives us a little fireball for the block out in the meantime. And what do we want here? I think we can make this smaller. So if this is like 10, then it'll be a pretty small fireball. So now we've got these little balls that go around. And the collider's on them already, so like you can see that they interact with the crate. They don't interact like particularly well because we haven't written that collision yet or how we want it to work. I think if they hit something, they just disappear. But maybe in the future they hit something and they light it on fire. So like so many things. That was a lot of math for a shader. I don't know that it was actually that much math. So like this isn't terribly complicated once you understand what it's doing, right? So we've got a UV coordinate. We had to recenter the UV coordinate from the top left to the center, which is what this UV minus vec2 is doing. It's recentering the center point. So then we're in the center of that rectangle. And then I'm subtracting the radius of the circle from the length of the UV. So, you know, shaders, GPU, super parallel. We're getting this for every UV that could possibly exist on the screen, more or less. So I'm subtracting 0.25 because that's the radius of the circle from the UV coordinate. So from the center, that's why we get it a little bit inside of the rectangle. And then that's it, really. Like we're using the step function because the SDF is a field from negative infinity to, what is it, 0 or 1 on the ring to positive infinity outside. So we're just stepping that to make sure that it's a hard cutoff rather than a gradient. And that's it. So I don't think there's too much math here. I definitely didn't write it in a way that is, you know, easily understandable, we'll call it. I didn't write it in a way that would translate well to educational material. But I have actually written that. So So I've already written this and made a video on it. This is what I just did. And these functions are much more understandable. And I write them in Rust so that you can understand what they're doing. So like an SDF, radius of 5, the center of the circle is 0, 0. If you get the distance from whatever point we're working with to the center of the circle, that's the distance from the origin. If you subtract the radius from the origin, then you know where the line is, right? And this has a bunch of like different debugs. So like in this example, we're showing distance from the origin. In the next example, we're showing distance from the edge and the math that is required for that. I think we have one or two more. The math gets a little bit more complicated for different shapes. So the way an SDF for a square works, if I full screen this, the way the SDF for the square works is actually, it only renders the top right and then mirrors it for the other directions. So if I'm in the top right, you can see this going around, but you can see also the equivalent position in the mirroring. And then there's a little description of like literally all we have is distance. So all we really know is how far we are from the shape. But yeah, I think SDFs are pretty cool. They can get pretty complicated depending on what algorithm you're working with, depending on whatever, but they are very cool. And this is also a video, so I did actually explain it. If you look for sign distance fields on the channel, you will find this video. And it's not as complicated as it seems, is kind of the way that I'll phrase it. There is math here, right? And as you get to more complicated shapes, like if we go down to something awkward like this cross, there's more here. And people who write shaders for some reason like single letter variables a lot. So like P is point, and who knows what B is here, and R is probably radius. But like, I think that's harder than actually reading the math. But they can get pretty complicated, and there's actually even like the cool S and whatnot. But yeah, so we've got, I think I'm happy with what we did today. It's been about 3 hours. We did basically fireball creation. So attack animation triggering on the 18th frame. The 18th frame triggers a fireball, which is handled by a system. The fireball is, it could have an image. Right now, it's just like a random shader. And it goes in the direction. And we don't have an enemy yet. Probably we'll do enemies and bosses next week. But yeah, this is cool. This is all working. We do have a couple bugs, like this dash bug that we were looking at earlier, where they just infinitely dash. But we've got, so the other thing is that we're spawning like these fireballs, right, that shoot out. The thing that I want to do for the heal is probably like a circular thing that happens on the floor next to the player. But that'll happen in the same way, basically. And then we've got our attack, we've got our dash, we've got interact, we've got sensor switches, we've got switches. Doors have to wait. There's a thing that I'm debugging. So I'm making the decision this week. See if this depth thing runs. I'm working on this WGPU example, which is just a rectangle. And the idea here is I want to write to the depth buffer. And when I have a doorway, your player should be able to walk through the doorway. And we can do that in one of two ways. We can either make the tiles for the sprites only as big as like the pillars. So in that case, these sprites would all get chopped up into 4 pieces, and then it would all work out correctly. It makes it a little bit more annoying to work with, but it would work out correctly. And we can always have multiple layers with different sizes. So we could have one thing that's visual and one thing that does, you know, collisions or something like that. But yeah, I either need to do smaller tile sizes or the depth texture testing. And which one I'm going to do, I'm going to choose this week and then move forward with that. Do I contribute to Bevy and development in general? I do try to. It's not my primary focus. So I'm not like in any way a subject expert on the Bevy project, you know, like I'm not an SME. I don't have any status with the project in that way. I do try to, like, if I see things that are broken that I'm trying to use, or, you know, underdocumented or whatever, I do try to contribute that. I try to do reviews. I want to get more into the rendering side of things. And I know that reviews are an area where the Bevy project would like help. So that's what I try to spend my time on. One of the things that I do with This Week in Bevy is I'm now tracking a whole bunch of stuff. So like if you click into any of these issues, they have links to like all of the PRs that are going in. So this is greatly helping my personal context for what is going on and how things work. If I wanted to add a primitive shape, right? I think there's ellipsoids or something that are still, let's go for primitive tracking. Hopefully that gives us the issue. Tracking issue, primitive shapes. So there's a bunch of shapes that have already been added here, right? And most of them are pretty much done at this point. But some of them need, you know, meshing, or like the ellipsoid hasn't been done. So theoretically I could go do that, or one of these pyramids. But yeah, watching PRs, getting reviews in, figuring out how to do things. We just worked with sign distance functions in that shader. At some point, I think somebody else has already built out a bunch of sign distance stuff that they want to get in. So, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah. Thank you for your work in your live streams. You gave me a lot of inspiration. If you ever do this for Leptos, I'll go crazy. I'll do more Leptos stuff. I actually have to give a talk on Leptos in September that I don't think they've announced yet, so I can't really talk about where I'm giving it or anything. But there will be a lot more Leptos stuff over the next couple months. A lot more WASM stuff too. I think Saturday mornings are probably just going to be game development, because that's what I want them for. But yeah, they should hire me to promote Bevy on YouTube officially. I will promote Bevy because I think it's a great project. They don't need to pay me for that. Also, they are not a corporation, and usually the people that I charge are corporations, right? Like if, I haven't done this for the channel, just to be clear, but if somebody was like, you know, a hosting platform for Rust, or like a Rust-based project, and they were a startup and they had a marketing budget and they wanted to like tell people about their product and whatnot, that would be where I would charge people. I don't do that on this channel because I don't need to currently, and I like the idea of not having sponsorship influence in the stuff that I talk about. So it's a constant, like, should I do that or not? And for up to this point, I've decided no, that I'm not doing that. That doesn't mean I'll never do it, but it has to be the right fit. Just officially recognize you and post on Twitter and stuff. They do. They retweet the This Week in Bevy stuff and whatever. It turns out if you do things that promote Bevy, that they are very happy about people, you know, promoting Bevy. So if I talk about Bevy on, you know, Mastodon or whatever, and it's Bevy related, it's on their radar. So not worried about that at all. I don't need like a title, if that makes sense. I don't need to be officially recognized in some way. I contribute to the Bevy product or project financially too. So I would encourage anybody, actually, not the Rust Foundation, the Bevy website. So Bevy now has a foundation. And if you click this donate button, you can donate. They're currently at like $8,000 a month. They are paying Alice right now as the first, like, I don't know if they consider her an employee or what. But Alice definitely deserves that money. There's a couple of tiers, memberships. I contribute, clearly. Here's my name. And there's a bunch of other people that do too. There's some corporations that contribute as well. But yeah. I think that I want Bevy to exist in the future, right? I'm really excited for what Bevy is going to be in 3 to 5 years, you know? And working with Bevy is a lot of fun. I like it a lot. So yeah, I don't need that kind of like official recognition or whatever. That's respectable applies to everything you said in the last 10 minutes. Cool. I'll take that. I think that's it for us for today, for the stream. I am happy with where we got. We got fireballs implemented. We got, whatchamacallit? We've got the attack animation. We've got attacks happening on individual frames. We've got the basis for being able to actually hit a potential enemy or to make more interesting attacks. And we've got the basis for rendering some sprite sheets out of Blender and making the fireballs look more interesting and stuff like that. We haven't started doing any of the art yet, just to be clear. This is all still block out art. So we'll end up doing something in Blender. We'll end up doing some stuff for the tile maps and like the artwork and switches and chests and all of that stuff needs to be done as well. So we'll see where that goes in the future. Her title being secretary is related to the board specifically. That is not her role in the project, if that makes sense. Like the Bevy Foundation has a board of directors and the maintainers are on that board. This is that list of people, right? They're people who have been around the Bevy project for a very long time, making very deep contributions to it for a very long time. So like Carter is listed as president and interim treasurer, right? Carter is the person who started the Bevy project. So do you refer to them as president? I don't refer to them as president. They are technically the president, but this is all like Bevy Foundation Board of Directors related titles. These are also people who, that's not, I don't know where the list of maintainers is actually. Bevy people, maybe? Yeah, okay. So here's a list of Bevy people, right? And you can see like Rob is here listed as a maintainer and a subject matter expert for rendering. And Alice is a maintainer, subject matter expert for docs, ECS, and you know, like controller and keyboard input. James and Francois were both on that list for different reasons. This is project lead and maintainer. So like, these are the roles inside of the project. That is the role for the board. Thanks a lot for streaming. Not there yet, but to use Bevy, but streams are keeping your interest up. Sweet. I do this every Saturday morning, so I will see you all next Saturday. Yeah, thanks for coming. Have a great rest of your day, y'all, and look forward to This Week in Bevy on Monday.